So let's keep working on our Matlab exercise. We in the last video we talked about how to access Matlab, both on campus and off campus. You can there are several venues for you to actually access the computers and its softwares on campus. Right? Lots of computer labs, and also uh, there is a IT building which allows you to use computers inside of it, and all those computers have Matlab installed. And then if you are off campus, if you or if you don't want to go to a computer lab, you can sort of access uh, uh, you can access those instances of those uh, environments from a browser by using the micro lab, right? By using the remote lab. But to log into the system, you will need a student account. Right? And then we talked about how to import data, basically Excel spreadsheets, right? How do we actually uh, create functions or scripts of those import process, right? And then you can reuse those import scripts and functions to load other data into your Matlab workspace. And then we talked about how to create and decorate figures, right? That's the first part of the exercise, right? But just in case that you haven't actually worked on it by yourself, you can let me just repeat some of the steps that we went through in the last video, right? So we can start over again. So the first thing is to go to the class website to download the Excel spreadsheets, which is from which are spreadsheets for information about cars, basically some data about cars. It's also some it's also a data set that's kind of useful for practice, right? We got like two Excel spreadsheets: 2004 data XLSX, and then 2007 data .xls, which are just the two data sets for cars from 2 different years. And then it looks like I have already downloaded them. If you click on those links, it's gonna show that you have. So let me just remove the duplicate, right? And then yes. Those two data are inside of my home drive H, right? But I will try to move them to my desktop. I'll move both data to my desktop, so it's easier for me to work from there, right? And then I can just minimize those windows. So this is inside of Matlab. This is the command window, and then this is the current folder. The content shows the current folder, and then that's variable space. We haven't actually loaded anything, so the variable space is empty, right? So now we have both data sets that's inside of the current folder, right? So what we can do is to actually click on the import data, right? This import data button from the home tab is gonna allow us to it's gonna open a import wizard, which is gonna allow us to specify what's the file, and also what's the format for us to load the data, right? So 2007 data, let's open it. Right, that's the import wizard. So we can specify what kind of a output data format we want to use, right? Is it going to be a table, or is it going to be a column vectors, or cell arrays, or string arrays, or numerical matrix, that kind of thing? Usually we just select table, because the Excel spreadsheet is indeed a table, right? And then you can select the range of the data that you want to select. So A2 is the beginning cell, right? This is a column, right? And then 2 is the row number. So A is the column number, 2 is a row number, right? So it starts from A2 to X 2596, right? So that's the last cell, actually. That should be the last cell. Right, so let's scroll down. So that's X column, and then 2596, that's the row number, that's the last cell. So at this stage, we can either just choose import the data, right? Or we can, if we want to reuse the import script or import function, we can create a import. Let's generate a function. Right? And then it's gonna give us a that's the editor. That's the editor window. For now, the editor window is let me minimize the import wizard. And then for now, the editor window is floating, right? It's not docked. It's not docked into the Matlab main window, right? But we can actually make it to dock, right? But let's just look at what's actually the function, what the function actually looks like, right? So it's got a keyword function, right? That's in blue color, right? And then this is the output of that particular function. You can think of function just like a black box, right? It's got an input, and then you have outputs. So table out is going to be the output, right? And then the output equals 2, and then followed by the name of the function. For now, it's called an import file, but you can change it to any name that you want to use, right? It doesn't have to be import file. And then parentheses followed by parentheses, a pair of parentheses basically. And then all the stuff that's inside of the parentheses are the inputs to that function, right? Those are the parameters. Those are the information that this particular function will need in order to actually work to produce its correct output, right? So let's just save it. Click on the save button, right? Again, I'm gonna sort of put it on the desktop. One of the things that you must sort of pay attention to is the file name. So the convention in Matlab is that you must make for Matlab function, the name of the function must be identical to the file name. So now the function name is import file, right? So the file name for this particular function must be import file, right? But if you don't like this particular function name, you can change it, right? So maybe it's not so informative enough. So let's just say import car data, right? Let's change the function name to import car data. You can change it. You can change it to any name you want. And then let's try to save it again, right? I didn't actually save it, right? In the previous dialog box, I didn't actually save it. I clicked on cancel, but this time I'm gonna save it. And you can sort of see the file name provided by Matlab import car data is identical to the function name import car data. So this time I'm gonna save it, right? So now I have a import car data function that's inside my on my desktop, and that's the file name, and then there's an icon in front of it. It shows fx, which means that it's a Matlab function. And then how do we actually use that function, right? So suppose this is the command window. Suppose I want to store the data inside of the, say, car data 2007, right? Equals to import car data, and then it's got like quite a few function. It's got quite a few inputs, right? It's got like 4 inputs. The workbook file, which basically requires a string input. The string has to specify the file name together with its path if it's not in the current directory, and then sheet name, and then star row, end row. The first parameter is the first input is actually mandatory, right? But the next 3 are actually optional, and it's actually showing you this function was generated by Matlab, right? So it's actually showing you how to use this particular function, right? So it's giving you some examples here. So import file. If you give the function just the one input, then it's gonna read the data from the first worksheet in the Microsoft Excel spreadsheet file, name the file, and then returns the data as a table, right? So by default, it's gonna read the first sheet, right? And then if you have 2 inputs, both the file name and also a sheet number, then it's gonna read from the specified worksheet, right? And then if you have like 4 inputs, file name, the sheet number, and also start row and end row, then it's not gonna sort of read the entire data. It's gonna read from the specified worksheet for the specified row intervals, right? So all those kind of lines that's in green and starts with the percentage sign are comment. This comment is sort of written for people. It's not for Matlab. Matlab is just going to ignore the whole thing that's in green, right? But people can read them to understand how to use this particular function and what are the expected inputs, that kind of thing. Right. If you would like to look at the body of the function, I actually would encourage you to do so. The key function here is XLS read. So inside of this import function, XLS read is actually doing the actual work, right? And XLS read is actually a Matlab intrinsic function. It's provided by Matlab. So when you purchase Matlab, this function is included. So you can call this function either in your own scripts or in your own functions, right? This function is provided by Matlab, so you can use it to read Excel spreadsheets. The body of the function, for now, it's kind of difficult for us to understand what the body of the function actually does, right? Later on, once we actually understand more about the once we understand more about the data structure and also how these kind of loops actually work, and then how branching structures actually work, it's going to be easier for us to understand what the function actually is doing, right? So it's not really that difficult to understand, right? But for now, let's use this particular function, right? So let's give it a file name. The file name is going to be 2007 dat.xlsx, right? And then a semicolon. If I put a semicolon behind it, then it's going to suppress any kind of a screen output. It's still going to execute all the codes, but it's going to suppress printout onto the command window. So now we execute it. So by default, it's going to read from the current directory, and my current working directory is actually on my desktop. So it will be able to actually find the two Excel spreadsheets. But if the data is not really installed, if the data are not really under my current working directory, then we will have to sort of specify the complete path in front of the file name. So my current working directory is C users pchem desktop, right? And then if I do an ls, I should be able to see the Excel spreadsheets 2007 data.xlsx, right? But suppose I am not in the desktop. Suppose I'm let's go like 2 levels above, right? So now I am not really in my my current working directory is not really on the desktop where I store the data, right? So if I do an ls, I shouldn't be able to see the 2 data files, right? The 2 Excel spreadsheets. If that's the case, how do I actually read the data, right? So I can still just using the arrow key, I can repeat a previous command. Using the upper arrow key, I can repeat a previous command that I just typed. So what I did is that I typed the first what I did is that I typed the first a few characters of the previous command that I used. So car, and then I pressed the arrow key, the upper arrow key. Then it's gonna repeat the previous command that starts with the first few letters that I just typed, right? So if I do this, if I re-execute the same command, this time it's not gonna work, right? The reason is because it cannot find the function, right? The reason it's giving it cannot find the function that I just sort of stored, created and stored, right? So if that's the case, how do you actually solve this problem, right? You must tell Matlab where to find this particular function by using a particular function or statement called add path. Add path is going to tell Matlab where to look for functions, right? So by default, Matlab is not going to sort of automatically search your entire file system to collect all the information about .m files, right? You have to tell Matlab where to look for those files, right? So add path. So where am I right now, right? So if I that's my current path, right? So if I already know where my functions are stored, I can just do add path users, right? And then my right. So I have added this particular path to the Matlab system. So Matlab is going to automatically search this particular directory or folder for functions, right? So if I do help import car data, it should be able to find this particular function, right? And then it's gonna print out all the green text, all those comment lines at the beginning of the file, right underneath the definition of the definition line of the function. It's gonna print out all the documentation of that particular file, right? And now I can actually use that function. Right? Again, I was repeating the previous file, but again, it's not gonna be able to. Oh, so it looks like it has actually found the data. So it found both the file and also the data, right? And the data was found not in the current directory, but in my desktop under this particular directory. Fine. So if we would like to sort of start over again, there's an easy way for us to clear out every variable in our current workspace, which is clear workspace. You have a button here, right? You can click on it, and then everything in the workspace are going to disappear. Then start over again, right? So car data will disappear. Everything will disappear, right? So this button. And if you prefer to type commands in the command window, what you can do is to type the command clear all. And then it's going to have exactly the same effect as clicking on this particular button, right? So now but this time let's try to. We have created a function, right? We have created a function. Now let's try to create a script. But again, let me go back to my desktop so where I can see my functions and data, right? But now let's try to create a script. Right? So sometimes you would like to actually create a script by reusing some of the commands that you have typed in the command window, right? Matlab actually has a storage of the history of all the commands that you have typed, and in order to actually access that history, you have to go to the switch windows button in the quick access bar and then click on it, and then you're gonna have a panel that's called command history, and it also shows you a keyboard shortcut, which is Control+1. If we click on it, then it's gonna give us this particular pane, right? So what we can do is to actually select the command that we previously typed, and then, but this time we're gonna right click on it to bring up the context menu, right? Once we have right clicked on it, we have some selections. You have create a script and also create live script. Create a script is gonna create a conventional script, a .m file. Right, just like the function file, but without the function definition. It's more like a collection or concatenation of the commands that you would have typed in the command window. It's not a function, right? But nevertheless, the file name has the same kind of a format. It's a .m file, right? But if you try to create a live script, the live script is going to give you more formatting tools. It's going to allow you to embed text, embed equations, embed figures, pictures, embed lots of rich text elements into your script. So your script is gonna look more like a report, look more like a full-featured documentation of your entire work process, right? And that script is executable in Matlab, so you can actually execute that live script just like an ordinary script, but it's gonna have lots more formatting elements inside of it. So let's select a live script or live editor. So now it's actually opening up a live editor. Let me maximize the window. And on the for the live editor, you're going to be able to see lots of new buttons. So you have a tab that's called live editor, right? And then you'll be able this new is going to allow you to create a new file and then open, save. These buttons are kind of familiar to us, right? And then insert. Underneath this insert group, you have both code, text, section break. Right? Text allows you to insert just ordinary text or formatted text, right? And those texts are going to be ignored by Matlab, but it's going to be useful for people to understand your script. And it's different from comment, right? Those are text that can be formatted, but a comment must start with a percentage sign, right? A comment line must start with the percentage sign. But the text is more like, so suppose we would like to insert a text. So if you click on the text button, you can insert a text, and then you can sort of select the kind of format. Is it going to be normal text or heading, or going to be title? Let's select the title, right? Let's just say car data analysis main script, right? So that's going to be the title of our main script, right? And then once we have made some changes to the script, we can click on the save button to save the changes, right? And then let's just save it as car analysis main script, right? It's just save it like that. And the live script has a .mlx format, .mlx suffix, right? So the name is going to end with .mlx. If you save it, we should be able to see. So in the current, we should be able to see this particular file now that we just created, .mlx, in the current folder, right? And there's an icon in front of it. It's the Matlab logo with the text, with a page behind it, and the page has pictures and stuff that's embedded in it, right? And then if we want to sort of insert more text, we can just press the enter and then type our text. We will load the Excel spreadsheet first, and then apply some simple analysis on the imported data and create some figures, right? You can just type like you are actually typing a report. And then if you want to sort of insert equations, you have equations here, right? You can either insert a latex equation if you know what latex actually is, or just a Matlab equation, right? And then here, once you click on the equation button, it's going to provide you lots of symbols, right? Symbols and the formatting tools for equations, basically. Right. Let's do an SQRT. Maybe x equals 2. Let's make a sort of slightly more fraction, right? 2a plus minus I have a b. Let's make it a square, right? B square. Looks like it's b. Right. So that's sort of just this equation is like irrelevant to the analysis we're going to be doing, but it's just to give you some idea about the capabilities of this kind of live script thing, right? Okay, so now we have a main script, and then we're going to keep adding commands into this live script, and later on we can edit it. Right? If you want to sort of run every command inside of this particular live script, you can just click on Run All. Right? Then it's going to run everything. And all the data variables are going to go into the workspace. Let me just dock live editor, so it goes into the main window. Right. Looks like I cannot increase the font size in my live editor. I was able to increase the font size in my editor, but yes, see if I can sort of increase my font size. No, it's not actually. So it changed the font size in my ordinary editor, but it didn't change the font size in my live editor. Right. So now let's look at this particular variable that's inside of our workspace, right? And this variable is actually a table. So it's got like 2,595 rows and 24 columns. And it's actually telling us that the type of the data is actually a table. Right. So a table is actually one of those Matlab data structures for holding data, for holding the information that you want to process. Right. It's basically it's a container. It's a container type. Right. So if we want to look at the content of this particular variable, we can just double click on it, and then it's going to give us this variable window that's going to display the content inside of the table. Right. And at this point, we might want to make some plots to show some relations between different columns. Right. So suppose I want to look at how rated horsepower varies with MPG, right, mile per gallon. So what I can do is to click on rated horsepower. That's the column head. Click on it, and then I must hold down the control key, and then click on the MPG column. Right. So now I have selected two columns inside of this table. Right. And at this point, if we go to the plots tab, then it's gonna display lots of buttons that allows us to make plots for these two columns. So the buttons that appears in this particular box depends upon the data that you have selected. Right. Later on, we're gonna see the buttons in here is gonna vary with the data and also the type of the data that you have selected. But for now, let's just click on the scatter button. As soon as we clicked on this button, we're going to see in the command window, it's going to automatically display this particular line. It's going to automatically display this particular line, right? This line is actually what Matlab actually executes behind your back, right? When you're actually clicking on this scatter button. Right. So the command that's associated with this particular scatter button is this particular command called scatter. That's a function call basically, and then with a bunch of inputs, 2 inputs actually, right? So what we did was that we clicked on the 2 columns, right? One is rated horsepower, and then the other one is MPG. Both columns are actually inside of the car data 2007 table. So what we have, so the inputs to the scatter function is basically they're just the 2 columns of that particular table. One is rated horsepower, and then the other one is MPG. But the important thing for us to actually pay attention to is how we should access those 2 columns, right? We are using the dot symbol. So rated horsepower and MPG are just the 2 different columns of the car data 2007 table, right? So a table is more like a large container, and then inside of that large container we have 24 smaller containers, and each of the smaller containers corresponds to 1 column. And if we want to access one of those containers, we can just use the dot symbol followed by the name of that particular small container. In this case, it's just gonna be the name of that particular column, right? So this the first input is gonna be the horizontal axis, and then the vertical axis is gonna come to the second input basically. So now we see the figure. So the horizontal axis is gonna be rated horsepower, and then the vertical axis is gonna be MPG. And every symbol here, it's a circle here. Every symbol corresponds to 1 car. So here the car data 2007 has 2,595 rows. So it's 2,595 cars. So every circle corresponds to 1 car. So on this particular plot, we have 2,595 circles basically, right? And for now, the figure is not so descriptive, right? By looking at the figure, we cannot really actually tell what this figure is about. So one of the things that we must do is to actually decorate our figures so that it can be self-explanatory. How do we actually decorate the figures? One of the ways is to click on this button, show plot tools and dock figure. If we click on it, then it's going to open the plot decoration tool. And it's going to look like that. It's going to look like that, right? So if we click on the axis, so if you just move your cursor over to one of those axes and double click on it, it's going to open up this particular pane, right? And then you can type in the labels. So, rated horsepower, that's going to be the label for our vertical axis, horizontal axis, right? And then for the vertical axis, that's going to be mile per gallon. The font is a little bit small, but as you are typing on it, it's going to display it on the figure right away. And then if you want to put a box around your figure, you can check this box. Click here. Then you're gonna get a box around your figure. And then if you want to put on grid lines, if you click on X, you're gonna get those X grid lines along the X direction. If you also click on Y, you're gonna get more grid lines, right? And then if you want to put a title on the figure, we can type relation between rated horsepower and mile per gallon. Right. That's going to give us a title for the figure. And once we are done with decorating this particular figure, if we want to sort of apply the same kind of process to other data or other kind of to create other figures that looks just like that, we might want to reuse all the processes that we just went through by generating another code. Click on the File menu button, and then we're gonna see an option that's called Generate Code. And if we click on that, it's gonna automatically generate the code corresponds to the everything that we have done, right? And now we are inside of the editor window, and automatically actually opens up this editor window, right? And then it's giving us a function. The format is actually quite similar to the import car data function, right? You got a keyword, and then output equals to the name of the function. But here, in this new function, it's just a function keyword without the output equals to. And then if there's no output, then that's okay. You don't have to sort of create an output for every function. And the purpose of this particular function is just to create a figure with the right format. So there's no point of using creating an output variable or something, right? There's no point of doing that. And then the name of the function is, for now, it's called create figure, right? And then it's gonna take two inputs, x1 and y1, right? And then the documentation of the function is telling you that x1 scatter x, y1 scatter y, and the purpose is to auto-generate it by it's telling you that it's a function that's auto-generated by Matlab, right? But now let's save this particular function. Let's call it not create figure, but create rated horsepower, rated HP, MPG, rated HP MPG figure. Right, let's call it that, and then let's save it. Let's save the file. So now you don't see the save button, right? The reason that you don't see the save button is because you're underneath the plot tab, right? If you go to the editor tab, you'll be able to see the save button, and now you can save it, right? And then the file name, the default file name provided by Matlab is okay. Let's just save it. So now we see another one, another function that's called create rated horsepower MPG figure, right? It might be a good idea for me to rerun the function inside of the script. So let me close this particular figure. Right. So now we have this particular function now. We can use this function in our main script. Let's call analysis main script, right? Let's just call this particular function. It's called create rated HP MP. Oh, I named the function wrong. I think it's mile per gallon, right? It's MPG. It's supposed to be MPG, but it's okay. Let's go back. It's not MGP. It's MPG, right? PG, mile per gallon. Right. And now it's gonna give us a red line. It's telling us there's something wrong. Matlab is not gonna accept a function name that's different from a file name, right? So now let's just save as, right? Create rated horsepower in PG. Right. So now we got like two different files. MPG is supposed to be correct, right? And MGP is the wrong function with the wrong function name. If we right click on it, suppose can we actually delete? Yeah, we can delete it. Right. So let's just delete it. And then let's go back to our main script. Let's call it. Let's call this create rated HP MPG figure. And then it's gonna require two inputs. It's gonna require this particular function is gonna require two inputs, right? X1 and Y1. And these two inputs are gonna be used for the inputs to the scatter function that's provided by Matlab, right? So do you remember how when we clicked on the scatter button, scatter plot button, that's the command that was displayed in the command window, right? Which means and the input to them is actually have this kind of format. It's rated horsepower with a dot in front of it, and then the table name in front of the dot, right? So what the scatter is going to expect is this kind of data, basically. And now we have to give this data to this create rated horsepower MPG figure function, right? So what we are going to do is to go back to our car the analysis main script, and then what we are going to do is do car data 2007 dot rated HP. That's going to be our first input to the create rated horsepower figure. Right. And then the second one is going to be car data 2007 dot mpg. Right. And then if we actually run this script, we should be able to see the figure that's embedded inside of the script. Right. That's the figure. Right. But now it looks like it's too small. Right. But if we actually we can actually make it bigger. And even though we didn't actually do anything with the labels and titles, and all the labels and titles are automatically added, right? Automatically added, and then all the grid lines also automatically added. The reason is because this create rated horsepower MPG figure function, this particular function, actually did all the labeling and also the put on the titles and put on the grid lines for us. And this is not a very long code. We can sort of look at it, right? Here it's calling the scatter function with the 2 columns as the inputs, right? And then the command for creating the label is called xlabel. It's called xlabel, right? And then the input to it is called rated horsepower. And then the command for creating the title is called title. And the input to that particular function, to this title function, is just the string for the title. And then the y label, the function for creating the y label, and then the function for putting on the box around the figure, right? So by looking at the function created by Matlab, we can actually learn quite a lot about how to actually do stuff, right? Because all of the functions are provided by Matlab, we don't really have to sort of use this particular function created by Matlab to do all those things. We can just type those commands or type those functions directly in our own main script to create the figures, right? And that's exactly what we are going to do right now. That's exactly what we're going to do right now. So the thing that we have noticed is that there's a significant amount of scattering, right? So for fixed rated horsepower, for example 300, right, the mile per gallon actually goes from like a 10 to close to 40, right? 38 or 37, that kind of range, right? It's a huge amount of scattering, right? So how do we actually explain this kind of huge amount of scattering, right? So there's a way for us to actually, if we want to sort of try to come up with an explanation about why we have this kind of a problem, let's go back to the variable. Let's go back to the variables, right? And look at what's actually inside of our data. So for example, you have city highway, right? Our experience tells us that if you drive on the highway, then your MPG could be a lot higher than you are driving on inside the city, right? On the local roads inside the city. So this might be a contributing factor that could explain the scattering. That could explain the scattering here, right? So now let's try to make another plot. Let's still go back to the variable window, and let's try to make another plot. And this time we're still gonna select the rated horsepower and MPG, but in addition to that, we're gonna select a third column, which is city highway, right? Again, hold down the control key. So first click on rated horsepower, that's gonna be our horizontal axis, and then hold down the control key to click on the MPG. So now we have like 2 columns selected, right? But now let's select the third column. And when I select the third column, which is city highway, you will notice that the buttons here in the plots tab are going to change, right? So hold down the control key and then select the city highway, right? Lots of buttons have disappeared. We have only 3 buttons left, right? So the buttons displayed in this particular, underneath this particular tab, also underneath the apps tab, is context dependent. It depends upon the data that you have selected in the variables window, right? And for now, if we have selected like 3 different columns in the same table, then there's only these three plotting tools or plotting buttons that's available to us to plot S3 column data, right? And depending upon your particular installation, you may have more toolboxes that allow you to make more complicated plots. If that's the case, you may see more buttons, but in any case, those buttons are going to change and based upon the data you have selected in the variables. So this time, let's look at G-scatter. Let's click on it. And then right away, you're going to be able to see G-scatter, the function call that Matlab actually made for us. Right? It's G-scatter. The first one is rated horsepower, MPG, and then the last input is city highway. And then we're going to be able to see another figure. For now, the figure is like not so clear, right? So let's go back to the window to actually adjust things, right? Let's look at more properties. So if I select some of the okay, so it's actually, if I click on those points, it's going to allow me to make adjustment to the size of those markers. For now, the marker is dot, right? And then the size of the marker is 5. So if I want to make the markers look clearer, I can just click on the marker. Maybe I can change it to a circle, maybe, right? And then maybe I can change the size to slightly bigger, say 8 or 10, right? That's going to make our marker look nicer. And then that's just for one type of marker. And then you also have another type of marker. Let's also change it to circle. And then let's change the color. Maybe this cyan color is not so great. Let's change it to black for example, right? And then let's also change the size of the marker to 10, right? So now it looks like a lot clearer, right? And now if we want to decorate the axis, Y label, let's look at the x-axis, right? Rated horsepower. And then y-axis is going to be mile per gallon. Right. And then the title is going to be relation between rated HP and MPG for city highway, right? So once we're done with our decoration, then we can try to generate the codes, right? So if again we click on the file menu item and then let's generate code. But this time the function that's created for us, again it's called create figure, right? But the function that's going to be created for us is somehow lower level. It's using the plot and then x1, y1, x2, y2 instead of using G-scatter. The previous figure that the previous function that was created by clicking on the generated code, which is the created rated horsepower MPG figure, right? It's actually calling scatter, right? And then this is actually a higher level function. But inside of the function that it just created by us, it's not really calling G-scatter. It's calling those plot. These are plot function calls. And the plot function calls are going to take x1, y1, and x2, y2 as the input. x1, y1 is supposed to be the rated horsepower and MPG data for the highway, for the city drives, and then x2, y2 is supposed to be the rated horsepower and MPG data for the highway drives, right? So it's actually expecting us to separate those data by ourselves and then use those separate data as input to this particular function, right? And separating those data it's not too difficult to do. You can just apply some kind of selection operation to the input data. But for now, let's not try to do that, because we know that there's a simpler way for us to make the same kind of plot, which is by just calling the gscaler function, right? So this particular function that's just created by Matlab is not so useful to us. Let's just close it, right? No, we don't want to save this particular function. But inside of the car analysis main script, we can try to create that function by ourselves. All we have to do is to just copy and paste the gscaler, this particular function. You can just select it, and then let's just copy it, and then let's just insert it, paste it here, right? Don't forget that we also did some decorations. Right? We also did some decorations to the figure, right? But how do we actually make the decorations by ourselves, right? It's not gonna be sort of generated. Those decoration codes are not gonna be generated for us by automatically. So we have to add those codes by ourselves, right? Don't forget we have these kind of commands that Matlab has taught us when it generated this created rated horsepower MPG figure, right? So the X label, Y label, we can just copy them over. Oh, I think I pressed the wrong button. I think. Control C, Control V, right? And then title, Control C, Control V. So relation between rated HP, let's just change the title, and MPG for city highway. That's going to be our new title. And then we also need a Y label. Y label is just going to be MPG, mile per gallon, right? So don't forget, this create rated horsepower MPG figure is going to create a one figure. That's the figure that's right here, right? If we want to create a new figure, without overriding the previous figure, we have to call a particular function that's called figure. In fact, in this particular function generated by Matlab, it also called a figure. If we look at this, if we go back to look at this particular function, we're going to be able to see figure here. So figure 1 equals to figure. So here it's actually calling the figure function without any kind of input, and then assign the output to figure 1, basically, right? So here we have to call the figure function again, but this time we are not going to assign the output to any kind of a variable. We'll just leave out the output, but we are still going to generate a new output. We're still going to generate a new figure, right? And if this time if we run all the scripts, we should be able to see a second figure. Or Y label, it's not so a real exclamation mark means that I typed something wrong. Right. So now let's run it. Right. So for now, there's it's kind of slightly more difficult to see the marker, right? To see the marker, which means what? Which means the marker size is probably too small, right? We can still go back and try to decorate it. For some reason, it's not really making any changes. Maybe I should just change the function call for gscatter. So how do actually, so the gscatter is one function name that's told, the MATLAB has told us, right? So how do I find out the details about this particular function? All I have to do is to type gscatter, and then I will be able to see, all the how to use this particular function. So for example, XY group, that's the third column, right? And then color, and then symbol, and then size, right? Color, symbol, and size. So suppose I don't want to change the color, for example. I'll just leave it empty. And the symbol, I'll give it a O, and then size, let's give it like 10, right? And let's see what's gonna happen. Okay, so it looks like it has made the changes, right? So red circles and the cyan circles for the highway, right? So right away we can sort of see some of the effects that we have made inside of the by using commands.